I think it's an important reminder to all of us who take our hard-earned money from out underneath the mattress and invest it. It's important to remind ourselves that we're taking a risk with our money, right? And the more risk we take, the more of a reward that we can expect. So there's no free lunch here.
You are tuned in to the Money Script Podcast. Today we will share strategies to help you grow your financial literacy and improve your money script. I'll be back with some important announcements. Until then, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Money Script Podcast. It's your host, Yohance Harrison. So happy to be with each and every one of you today. We are back again with another edition of Between Two Advisors. And today I have one of my favorite financial advisors on the planet. I want to introduce all of you to Taylor Schulte. He is the co-founder of the AGC community, co-host of the Kids' podcast, and my favorite stat of his, host of 2 Apple 100 podcasts, top 100 podcasts, like 2 of them, not 1, but 2. I mean, I guess you got to try to beat yourself at some point. He is also a CFP, that is Certified Financial Planner, founder of Define Financial, which is a fee-only retirement planning firm with over $225 million in assets under management. Taylor, like I said, one of my favorite financial advisors on the planet. Thanks for joining me.
Yohance, I appreciate the kind introduction. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for today's Between Two Advisors. Is that a little nod to Zach Galifianakis?
It absolutely is. Thank you for noticing. It
Love
absolutely
it.
is. It's just we won't be as mean to each other.
Okay, fair enough.
So one day someone will, I'll have to do that with someone just because, and hopefully Zach will send me a cease and desist. Then I'll know I've made it. Then I know I have a top 100 podcast.
Exactly.
So typically in these episodes, Taylor, the intention is for us just to have what we like to call the coffee room water cooler talk, where our listeners, who are mainly students and folks that are transitioning into medical school or out of medical school into residency into practicing, of course, all of my wonderful clients. Hi, good to talk to all of you. A few family members, things of that nature. But what they want to hear are 2 professionals kind of talking about them and how we are helping to sharpen each other's swords. And today, I want our topic to be volatility. And I think it's appropriate because I don't know. I mean, I try not to pay attention to the market every day, but yesterday kind of caught my eye. Coming off of a pretty good week, and I was like, okay, things have calmed down a little bit. And then headlines, I think the NASDAQ was down 3%. The Dow was down something more than 1. I didn't even get a chance to see what the S&P was, but it was what some folks like to call a bad day in the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just curious for you, I know you've been in business, I guess, about as long as I have, 2 decades.
Yeah.
About that. So you and I, we've been through, we came off of 9/11. That's when I was getting started. So 9/11, we had 2008, we had nothing for a long time. And then we had COVID. So we've been through multiple instances of these bear markets, these recessions. I'm curious, Taylor, what are some of the things you're doing, saying to clients that are starting to feel the nervousness that this volatility can bring?
Yeah, I think it's an important reminder to all of us who take our hard-earned money from out underneath the mattress and invest it. It's important to remind ourselves that we're taking a risk with our money, right? And, the more risk we take, the more of a reward that we can expect. So there's no free lunch here. If we invest in the stock market, number one, we should, invest with the expectation that we're going to be investing for a long period of time. And number 2, there is going to be some volatility. There are going to be pullbacks in the market. One of my favorite quotes is from Morgan Housel. And he says, if somebody on television or in the media says that they predict a 10% drop in the markets this year, what they should actually say is, I expect everything to be normal this year because on average, we have about a 10% pullback every single year on average. So Sometimes we get spooked by what happens in a single day or the potential of a 10% drop or even a 20% drop in the markets. But these things are normal. We should expect them to happen. We should not expect things to just go up and up and up forever. So, the volatility is the price we pay for the performance that we get. I don't know who to credit that quote to, but it
It's a
is
great
an
one. Love
often
it.
used quote. And so I just like to remind myself, remind our clients that, we are taking risk with our investments. And it's important to understand how much risk that we're taking so we can set proper expectations and so we don't react during these difficult time periods. The last thing that comes to mind, I saw somebody tweet this out yesterday. After yesterday was an ugly day in the markets. S&P was down 2 or 3%, whatever. But is still up year to date 16% or something.
Yeah.
It's like,
I
you
love
got to
it.
zoom out and put it into perspective here that, we
Yes.
had a rough day in the market, but overall, if you've been invested, year to date, you're still doing quite well.
So I think that's one of the struggles sometimes that I find that clients will have, and also advisors will have, because we do have advisors listening to the show as well. Shout out to all of you out there working hard to help other individuals, the hearts of social workers and minds of entrepreneurs. Let's do this. But I find sometimes it can be difficult when a client starts a new relationship with an advisor and they started at the height or at the top of the market.
Yeah.
And, that advisor may move over the portfolio and, maybe they rebalance it a bit, or maybe it just comes over in kind. But all of a sudden that client can find themselves judging their advisor's worth and value by what's happening in the market on a daily basis. And it's like, well, I mean, we started at the top of the market. I remember I had clients where we started investing the beginning of 2022.
Right.
Okay. And it was just, we went nowhere fast. It just went
Yeah.
down. It was like, whew. But at the same time, I felt like I did a pretty good job of helping manage those expectations. So I'm curious, Taylor, what do you do when you meet that new client that's bringing over that large sum of money and we're in the midst of a bull market?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's setting proper expectations with people. And I often will say, like, it's probably going to happen. The markets are probably going to get ugly from here. Brand new relationship. Everybody's excited. Like, I'm sure things are not going to go our way immediately. So just setting proper expectations that the market, doesn't go up every day forever. But the other thing that we'll do is I like to approach these conversations with talking about the worst case scenario. Right. If we're going to rebalance the account or we're going to invest the account in, let's call it a 70% stock or 60% stock portfolio, like, what does that mean? If things got ugly tomorrow, if we went through an 08, 09 style of crisis tomorrow, what's the worst case scenario? And we had this conversation with a prospective client yesterday. And it's such a different question when you say, hey, how would you feel, Yohance, if your portfolio dropped by 30% versus saying, Yohance, you have a $3 million nest egg. You've worked really hard for this money. You just told us that you want to retire like tomorrow immediately. How would you feel if that $3 million turned into $2 million, right? Because a 33% drop in your portfolio wouldn't be uncommon based on
But
your
you just
70%.
told me I'm losing $1 million. That's what you just said.
Right. But, losing 30% sounds very different than your nest egg just got cut by a third from 3 million to 2 million. And just the way we reframe those conversations can help clients or prospective clients better think about the risk that they're taking. So I don't like to scare people right into like, this could happen, but it's important to set proper expectations to know if that did happen, how would we respond? How would we react? And if they say, oh no, that's fine. Like, I've got other savings. I have a plan. Here's how I would attack it. I would live off my cash and live off my bonds and let my stocks go on a wild ride. Totally cool. Right. Or they might say, if I lost $1 million out of my $3 million nest egg, I would lose sleep. I would lose my mind. I feel like I'd have to continue working. That changes the conversation. So I like approaching those initial conversations. And even now we are talking about prepping for upcoming fall client meetings, saying, the markets have been, really kind to us for a long period of time. It's probably worth revisiting that worst case scenario conversation. Hey, client, like, you've got a 60% stock portfolio. Here's what that means. And here's what could happen if we went through a catastrophic event. Now, we always like to follow that up by saying, if we were to go, because now we're in the planner's seat, if we were to go through that catastrophic event and your portfolio dropped by X% or X dollars, here's how we would respond. Here's all the pieces we have in place to weather that sort of storm. This is the work that we've done to prepare for that. But I want to set that expectation that could happen based on the risk that they're taking.
Yeah, I think it's very important to set that expectation. And like you said, we're not here to to be doom and gloom, and to plant these seeds of fear. It's just, this is what happens, and I was just sharing with a soon to be retired client prospect as well. Just the likelihood that said, look, if you plan to live another 25 years, you're probably going to see 4 or 5, maybe 6 recessions over that 25-year period, because they tend to happen about every 5 to 7 years. And every one of 3 of those, I think the saying goes, is really bad.
Yeah.
And so that's the planning part. We have to prepare for, what does that look like? What are some of the mechanics that we can put in place to still protect the income that you need to get from that portfolio, the liquidity that you need from that portfolio, and knowing that we still have a 25-year time frame.
Yep.
One of my favorite risk tolerance questionnaire questions that always pops up on just about any risk tolerance questionnaire that a client's taken. Doesn't matter what firm they're getting it from. The question shows up is, what is your time frame? And I always tell clients, like, it's a trick question. I'm like, what do you mean? It says 1 to 3 years, 4 to 7, 7 to 10, or 10 plus. I was like, yeah, it's a trick question. Like, well, what is my time frame? I was like, what's your answer? Well, I'm retiring in 5 years, so I guess 4 to 7. I was like, are you going to die? Like, what do you mean? It's like, it's a trick question. Like, I'm in this for life, aren't I? The last thing you want to have happen is that you run out of money before you run out of breath.
Yeah. I like that response. Where my head was going is, what's your time frame for what, right?
Or for what? Yeah, that's also, that's the secondary part of it.
Yeah, for what, and also, like, what asset class are we talking about here? Because, your stock portfolio, you might have a time horizon of 10 plus years, right? But you might have a medium term or short term bucket in your portfolio, cash, short term bonds, right? That does have a shorter time horizon for those shorter term needs. So, you might have a 1-year time horizon for these needs and expenses over here, and you might have a 15-year time horizon for these needs and expenses over here. So, it doesn't really, that question doesn't really get to, like, the answer that we need, which is, our lives are dynamic. We have all sorts of different time horizons for different things. We don't need our whole global portfolio to, like, arrive at the same place on retirement date. And that's why I think diversification is just so important, that we just have different needs at different times. And I always want to be prepared that if that 60% of our portfolio crashes, it's okay. We can let it go on a wild ride, because we have these other assets here set aside for those other near-term needs. Another thought, Yohance, that came to mind when you're asking about, like, a client, hiring you and then immediately markets going south. I think it could work the other way around too, where client hires you, starts working with, or they're on their own, right? And they make an investment, and, like, year to date, they're up 16%. Well, now their expectation is, like, that's what should happen every single year. Next year, Yohance, when the portfolio is only up 2% year to date, or it's lost money, now are they upset? So it can go both ways too.
I got fired in 2022. That happened. So I picked up a new client just before COVID, 2019. Moved over his portfolio, was doing it on his own, and done some good things. And I really went into it saying, let me show you. Yeah, you're doing investing. You're diversified, maybe a little overweighted, but let's talk about tax management strategies, and talked about tax loss harvesting and getting the Roth IRAs going, and switching his deposits to his IRA to his 401k to be Roth. All of this other strategy stuff going on. And 19 was an okay year. Wasn't bad. The year ended up 2020. I was one of the lucky ones. He was in the process of consolidating old 401ks. So I was buying into the market in March and April of 2020. I was like, I'm going to look like a genius after this. And I did.
Yeah.
Okay. 2021, another good year. And then 2022, 4 months into the year, it's like, you suck. I'm like, what? I'm like, well, if you had did this 3 months ago, we'd be up 10%. I'm like, yeah, but that was never part of the strategy. Okay. And he said, I could do better on my own. I'm like, go do better on your own. Go. And it can be just as damaging, if not more. You said something that made me think about Daniel Crosby, who will soon be a friend of the podcast, coming next month. Really excited. One of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
His latest book, The Laws of Wealth. He has a chapter about diversification, and he stated diversification means always having to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right.
And I had never read it or seen it in that way before. And I've started saying to clients, like, hey, Sorry, I diversified you. Yeah, we only bought 4 shares of NVIDIA. My bad. Sorry. I
Yep.
diversified. I'm so sorry. Had a client, NVIDIA turned into like 40% of his portfolio 3 weeks ago. I hit him up like, hey, let's sell. I think now is a good time. Are you sure? I was like, I'm not, but I think now is a good time. All right. Yeah. Do whatever you think you need to do. And then I get the call like, whoa, how'd you know? I didn't. I had no idea. I mean, I don't have to say sorry this time,
Yep.
but it just, and I'd explain it just as easily could have went in the other direction.
Yeah.
And I would have looked like an idiot for selling half of your portfolio before it goes on another 50% run. I
Yep.
don't know. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I have to think about living through WAMU going bankrupt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what comes to mind too. Oh, wait, that's my scariest story I share with clients all the time is the individual I met that had all of his money in WAMU stock. And we worked, the building we were in was a Washington Mutual building. And I said to him several times, let's talk. And he told me that he didn't need me. Basically, he sunned me. He said, son, I've been doing this longer than you've been breathing.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I remember the day he was taking his box out of his office with the stuff with tears in his eyes. And he said, what am I going to do now? And he was 64, 65. I had no answers for him. He was like, my house is underwater. My 401k's got 5 figures in it now. Used to be millions and went down to 5 figures. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And my wife's already retired. I had no answers for him.
Yeah.
But I've seen what can happen. It is scary. It is scary. I've seen what can happen.
And sometimes I mean, I don't wish that upon anybody at all. Sometimes as an investor, you have to go through those difficult time periods to kind of learn your lesson, right? You have to try to buy some individual stocks. It doesn't go your way. And you're like, oh, okay, I need to step back here and let a professional do this or really button up my approach. But yeah, I love that quote. Diversification always means having to say you're sorry. I believe it's attributed to Brian Portnoy, so I don't want to steal it.
Portnoy. Oh, yeah, he did. He does quote Portnoy a lot in this. I got to get Portnoy on the podcast.
No.
That's what I got to do next. Then.
But I use it as well. And I think it also goes back to like how you started this conversation saying like market volatility, markets were a mess yesterday. But then my mind sometimes goes like, well, what market, right? Because there were actually asset classes yesterday that actually performed quite well or held up okay. So diversification always means having to say you're sorry. To me is like, there's always going to be something in your portfolio that's not behaving. One day it could be US stocks, another day it could be international. But there's typically something in that portfolio that's doing well at the same time. It might be cash or it might be bonds or it might be tips or something else. But, there's probably something in your portfolio yesterday that was doing well. So when someone says, oh God, the markets are terrible, or, hey, what do you think about the markets? I'm like, well, what market?
Which
right?
one?
I mean, there's a lot of different markets.
No, that's a good point. I'm going to use that next time someone asks me about how'd the market today? Which one?
It's a great response. Yeah. They'll kind of look at you like, well, I don't know, like US stocks. Yeah. But did you see the bond market yesterday?
Exactly.
The bond portfolio is probably up like 3%, so it certainly just changes the conversation. And again, I mean, it speaks to the power of diversification, and we want to have things moving in different directions.
Indeed. I want to transition a bit just to get a historical perspective here and just get inside of your mind a bit. And I'm curious, we like to ask our guests on this podcast a question about money, and we'll get to that. But I want to ask you as an advisor a more poised question about your mission as a financial advisor. So why did you decide to be a financial planner?
I have no idea. I seriously, I fell into this profession. I had this like attraction to finance. I was like attracted to investing. My grandfather gifted me a little bit of stock when I was like 12, but like I was kind of just like drawn to it. But yeah, I luckily just got a job at Morgan Stanley at 22 years old. Just, threw my resumes out there, wanted to work in finance, had no idea what a financial advisor really meant or what I was going to do for a living. The branch manager at Morgan Stanley gave me a sales quota, gave me a desk and a phone and a cubicle. Was like, there you go.
And a stack of leads.
Yeah.
Smile and dial.
And this was like you, this was June of 2007. So that's when I got going. Now, fortunately, I fell in love with the profession. I was 5 years at Morgan Stanley and realized, oh, there's this whole other side to the profession.
Whoa, pause. Hold on. Wait a minute. Wait, we got to rewind. For those of you paying attention out there, we talked a lot about timelines. He said he started in June of 2007. So you're in your first year.
Yep. 22.
And you experienced the worst recession known to any person living.
Yep.
How did that go for you?
Yeah. It was probably the best thing that ever happened, right?
Mm.
To your point about like working with clients as an advisor, to realize really quickly that the market doesn't go up forever is really powerful. If I had started, in 2010 and had this, decade long bull market, I'd have a different perspective for sure. So it was the best thing that ever happened. It was also extremely challenging. You mentioned Washington Mutual. We had Washington Mutual in our building as well. And Morgan Stanley stock at that time was
Oh
down in
yeah,
the low.
Morgan was
Yeah.
it became a shadow of the former selves.
Yeah. I mean, low
Yeah.
single digit stock price. I mean, there's people there that, thought that their 401ks were going to zero. So it was a really challenging time period, but it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I learned a lot about having these hard conversations and but I battled through it and ultimately again realized there's this whole other side of the profession, this comprehensive financial planning. We don't have to sell products and mortgages and life insurance. And so ultimately led me to where I'm at now. And I'm so grateful that I found my passion. There's some stat out there, like the average college graduate has like 5 different jobs in the first 2 years of graduating. I know my wife went through that journey where she just struggled to find what she wanted to do. So I'm just really grateful for that. And nowadays I talk to young students and they're like, 18, 19 years old. They're like part of the FPA chapter at their school. They're studying for their CFP. They're listening to Kits's podcast. I'm like, I didn't know, any of this. So yeah, I just kind of stumbled into it and it's my passion. I think you asked like my mission at this point. I am a really big believer in being a specialist and an expert. I tried to be a generalist for too long, and I've recognized that the benefit and power of being a specialist and only working with one type of person and helping to solve their unique, complex issues. And I look at it much like the legal world, right? You're not going to go to a state attorney for a personal injury case. You're going to go to a specialist. And so what really motivates me now is just really owning this specialist role, only working with one type of person and just doing really good work for them. Second to that, I do host a finance podcast. I really believe in putting good financial information in the hands of everyone out there. So I can't work with everybody. But by hosting a podcast, by doing a lot of writing, I'm able to improve financial literacy in this country. Well, I mean, globally with some of the reach of the podcast and just put really good information in people's hands. Because there's, as you know, a lot of bad stuff out there. So I do have this like passion for education on top of owning my niche and my specialization and working and helping those families.
I think you all can tell now why he's my favorite financial advisor. See, samey. I mean, that's the reason why you're here right now, because I can't reach everyone. This is a worldwide podcast. I know the concepts that we talk about are applicable anywhere where you use some form of money to exchange it for time and services.
Yep.
If you are somewhere on the planet doing that, you can learn some financial literacy from these types of podcasts. And believe me, there's enough disinformation out there. Speaking of disinformation, I'm going to have to talk about it later. Taylor, I saw the craziest thing the client sent to me. TikTok, of course. This salesperson is what I'll call him, because I'm not going to refer to him as a financial advisor and even insurance agent. I'm just going to say salesperson. Said that he has a product that he can put $300 a month into, and it will be $1.8 million by the time he's 60.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll live on $83,000 a year tax-free for the rest of his life.
Right.
I mean, it was immediately, but my financial brain started doing a financial calculation, and I was like, wait, the rate of return is like 17% to achieve that.
Yeah.
Like there's no way.
Yep.
It doesn't. And I mean, if he's 2 years old, possibly there's a way. But he didn't appear to be 2. He had a couple of gray hairs.
Yeah.
So I'm giving him at best, let's say he grays early, 35. I was like, you're not going to put $3,600 away for 25 years and end up with $1.8 million, whatever the number was. Like, no.
Yeah.
No. But that's part of the problem. There's so much of that out there, which is why we have to speak our voices loudly and bring as many people into a place where we're just going to tell them the truth of what their options are. And, if they want to go that route, they can, but it's probably not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I know who you're referring to. There is a gentleman out there that runs a website and a Twitter account called Honest Math. maybe you've come across it, but Honest Math is a free website, and he has brought to the surface all of the risks associated with that product that you just referenced, and highlighted the dangers of it. So you can showcase that in the show notes, or send people if you want to go there and look. Now,
happy to do it.
Now, setting aside the math, because this guy's like an ultra nerd and like really brings out the problems with this product you're referring to. Set all that aside, because I don't expect the average consumer to understand, is that person telling me the truth? Is that a real thing? Set all this to the side, set the math to the side. If it sounds too good to be true, it is, right? That's it. Like if something is blowing your mind, like, oh my God, like that sounds amazing, it's probably something to run away from. So that's just like, use your gut. Like, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Move on.
Move on. Indeed. Well, as we move on, I have to end with this. And I think you already alluded to it earlier. I believe I know where you're going to go with this, but who knows? It could be something different. A part of the Money Script podcast is we think about money scripts as your first memory of money. So we like to ask our guests what their first memory of money is. So Taylor, what is your first memory of money?
My very first memory of money, I was 7 years old, and I know I was 7 years old because it's printed, or it was printed on my debit card. But my mom walked me to the Wells Fargo branch across the street from our house. I'd saved up some money from allowance or whatnot, and filled out the application and deposited the $20, and then would get my monthly statement and be able to see the what little interest I was earning. I still have one of my first statements today, which is really cool. But it's got your account was first open date on my old Wells Fargo card. I don't use Wells Fargo anymore, but that was my first memory. And what's actually really cool is that because that was my first memory and it was so impactful and so memorable, so I've got 3 kids, 7, 5.5, and 3. My 2 boys are so close. I like treat them the same. They're 5.5 and 7, but I recently took them to the bank with the cash that they had saved, and we just opened up their first bank accounts and got them all set up. And it was just a really, really cool, I'm getting chills talking about it, just a really cool experience to share with them, the experience that I got. And really neat.
Parents, that is the beauty of the first memory. No matter what your first memory it is, you get to create your child's first memory of money. Yeah. Actually, most of us learn our relationship with money. We learn it, we inherit it from our parents and grandparents, or whomever we spent time with, especially during those early teenage years. And 7 through 14 is usually around the time frame where you start to develop your thoughts, habits, relationships, critiques of your relationship with money. So that is where it all began. So Taylor, that's beautiful, man. That's awesome.
That's cool. It's cool.
It's awesome. All right. Well, Taylor, if anybody wants to, or fits your criteria specifically, and wants to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, just go to youstaywealthy.com. That's the hub for pretty much everything that I'm publishing out there, from the podcast to blogs that I'm writing. Head over there. You can find everything you need.
Beautiful. We'll have the links in the show notes, of course. And as we've said, or as I've said in the past, do not keep financial literacy a secret from others. If you're learning something and you have a friend, you have a family member, just as much as you're going to talk about to all my football fans out there, now, as we am dating what time of the year it is, but football starts on Thursday. I'm a huge NFL fan, for those that know. It starts on Thursday. You don't just have to talk about football. You can also talk about financial literacy. It's a great thing to talk about. So share this podcast, share Taylor's podcast, share some truth, some options, some financial literacy with someone else today. And of course, we'll be back next week with a few more guests. We're going to be rolling through the fall. Brianna, thank you. Brianna has went out there and I gave her a list of my favorite people, and so far everyone said yes.
Awesome.
I'm back. Wasn't that a great show? I hope you learned something. I know I did. Now, before you go trying anything you heard today, remember, it is not intended to be specific tax or legal advice. If you need that, go see a CPA or an attorney. If you would like any complimentary consultation with a knowledgeable advisor, visit moneyscript.com and schedule a 15-minute consultation. Want Yohance to come speak at your next event? Go to the Money Script website for that too. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. MoneyScript Wealth Management is a registered financial advisory service in multiple states. Want to learn more? Get the full disclosure on our website, moneyscript.com.